Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is going to be the making of a pencil skirt. So if you're interested in seeing that, then let's get started.
So starting with the pattern piece, I've used my block here. I've just traced around the block. I've added an inch to the bottom and then some additional length for the hem. This one is cut on the fold. I have kept in the dart and then just added the little extension piece to the top to make it high-waisted. And then onto the back, exactly the same thing here, and this one isn't cut on the fold and it has a 2 cm seam allowance at the centre back. Same thing with the dart and same thing with the extension at the bottom. And then for fabric, I'm using a medium heavyweight scuba I bought from Fabric Styles. And then on to the cutting out. If you want any more information about the scuba I'm using, I do chat about it in my plans video, which I shall link below. And again, if you want any more information about the extension piece to my pencil skirt in order to make it high-waisted, I followed a tutorial which I shall leave linked below as well. So just doing my usual, snipping my notches, popping pins in at the points of my dart, and that's the back piece. So now on to the marking of those darts. So I'm just popping a little dot in where each of the pins are and then connecting those dots. Before pinning up my darts. That's the front done. On to the back. Doing exactly the same thing here again. Marking little dots where my pins are, connecting the dots, and then pinning. So just pinning in the usual way, popping a pin in the horizontal at the point of the dart, making sure my lines back and front match up, and popping a pin straight through. And then here I'm reusing the little extension pieces I used to make my high waist, but I'm reusing these for the facings both front and back. So front is cut on the fold, back just on 2 layers of fabric, and I've just folded out the darts. And now to some sewing. So the darts in the front, I'm just back stitching at the start, getting to the first dot that I marked and then pivoting just slightly and following the line straight down. So that will give me the nice little curved waistline I'm after. Letting my threads run off and tying. And that's how it looks. And I'm using a tiny little zigzag stitch here. Same thing again, back stitching at the start, pivoting just slightly at that first dot, following the line straight down, letting my threads run off, tying, and that's how it looks. And of course I do the same on the other darts. So now on to the side seams. So I'm just making sure my side seams match up, making sure my notches match up, and pinning. Doing the same on the other side. And to the overlocker. So I'm trying to stick to my 1 cm seam allowance here, trying to be as accurate as I can, making sure my notches all line up, and that's how the side seam looks. And then back to my facing pieces, so I'm just marking where the darts are. That will help me be a little bit more accurate when I come to place this onto the skirt. And I've chosen not to interface here. I have interfaced and not interfaced scuba in the past, and I like how it looks both ways. So for this one I chose not to. And that's how it looks. Now just to place that onto the top of the skirt. So I'm matching up my notches there where my darts are, my side seams and my centre back seam before overlocking. Sticking to my 1 centimetre seam allowance, trying to be as accurate as I can be the whole way along. And that's my facing in. So to give a nice neat finish at the top and to try to prevent the scuba fabric from rolling at the top, I'm understitching here. So I have my seam allowance over to the right hand side and I'm stitching directly on top of it, just using a straight stitch. And now just to tidy up all of the edges, so I'm running each of the seams of the skirt, each of the edges I should say, through the overlocker just to give them a bit of a tidy up, make sure they're all nice and straight and make sure the inside has a nice clean finish. And now for the zip. So I've just popped the zip on, I have placed it at the waistband and popped a pin at the bottom, and then I'm pinning the centre back seam between that point and the top of the slit. And here I'm just sewing up that centre back seam, just measuring there to make sure that I am at my 2 centimetre seam allowance here. And for this seam I have used a zigzag stitch, a very small zigzag stitch, because I imagine there was a bit of stress on this area of the skirt. So I don't want my stitches to pop there, so used a zigzag stitch. And now giving the whole thing a good press. And this scuba did take a nice little bit of heat actually. So pressing up the hem as well and pinning in place just while I'm at the pressing table. And I'm folding the corners here to give a sort of mitered effect. I like the way that looks on the inside, it keeps it really nice and neat. So pleased with that. So now moving back to the zip. So I've just drawn a line from the centre back seam that I sewed there straight up to the waist, and then I've measured the teeth on the zip just to see how much I want the teeth to show, and that for me was 1/4 of a centimetre. So I've just marked in that 1/4 of a centimetre the whole way up, and now I'm just running over that line that I've marked with a long stitch on the machine. This will help when I come to place my zip to be a little bit more accurate, and when I press it I'll have a nice clean edge, you'll see here in a wee second. So I've just snipped through the seam allowance in a diagonal to where I want the bottom of my zip to finish. I've pressed the whole thing and now just pinning that zip in place. I have followed a tutorial that is on Professor Pincushions' channel, which I shall leave linked below, that will give you a lot more detail on how to use this method. And this really is the only tricky bit about this skirt. So I've just sewn the little triangles at the bottom to the bottom of my zip, just securing the bottom in place. And now just stitching down the teeth of the zip, as I say, 1/4 of a centimetre away from the tooth edge. Doing the same on the second side of the zip. And I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It's super neat, there's no stitches on the outside. I really like this. And now just to do the finishing. So I have folded the zipper tape in underneath, sandwiching it between the back of the skirt and the facing. Popped in a couple of pins. I'm doing the same with all of the seams around the skirt, so at the dart lines and at the side seams. And then I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So I don't want there to be any stitches showing through this skirt. I want to keep it nice and plain and simple. And while I'm at the machine, I'm going to stitch my hem. So first of all, that facing piece beside the zipper. So I've just placed my needle in the zipper tape, not catching the front of the fabric, but catching the back. And that is super neat. I'm really pleased with that. Doing the same at one of the dart lines. So trying to make sure that my stitches fall directly in that seam line and then catching the facing on the back. Of course, I've done that with all the seam lines. And now to the hem. So for the hem, I'm just using a longer stitch and a straight stitch actually. I'm not too bothered here about using a zigzag stitch. And that's how it looks. And I'm very pleased with that. And this is the finished article. So I really love how this turned out. I love the gold zip. I love the split in the back. I love the shape. I love the fit. I love this skirt.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do. And I shall see you on Friday with the making of the top that matches the skirt. Maybe doesn't match this skirt, but the top anyway. So until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye folks!